What links a disgraced Grand Duke, a Swedish prince, and a legendary Parisian jeweler? A treasure of sapphires and diamonds, a wedding gift that became a symbol of paternal love, irrevocably lost in the storm that forever altered the world. This isn't merely a story about jewels, it's a tale of love, loss, and an indomitable will to live. The history of the House of Romanov is replete with tragic chapters, but the fate of Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna the Younger, granddaughter of Emperor Alexander II, strikes a particularly poignant note. The shadow of orphanhood loomed over her young life from the moment she was born. Her mother, Greek Princess Alexandra, whose beauty was as delicate as her life was fragile, passed away giving birth to her younger brother, Dmitry Pavlovich. Her father, Grand Duke Paul Alexandrovich, the youngest son of the Tsar Liberator, soon found solace in a new marriage. But this union, born of passionate love with Olga Pistolkos, a woman not of royal blood, was deemed morganatic, an unequal union. The wrath of his nephew, Emperor Nicholas II, was swift and severe. Paul Alexandrovich was banished from Russia, stripped of his titles and his income. His children, Maria and Dmitry, remained in their homeland, orphaned for a second time. Their guardians were appointed as their paternal uncle, Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich, and his wife, Grand Duchess Elizabeth Fyodorovna, elder sister to Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna herself. As Maria Pavlovna later recalled, the walls of their new home, a magnificent palace, were steeped in sorrow. Uncle Sergei, despite his deep brotherly affection for Paul, could never forgive him for this marriage, which he viewed as a betrayal of the memory of his first, dearly beloved sister-in-law, Princess Alexandra. This inflexibility cast a heavy shadow over his interactions with his niece and nephew. He severely restricted any contact the children had with their exiled father. The rare letters, penned by childish hands, underwent the strictest censorship from their uncle guardian. Paul Alexandrovich was effectively cut off from raising his own children, for Sergei Alexandrovich, having assumed guardianship, considered himself solely responsible for their fates. Yet even in this gilded isolation, amidst cold luxury, a world awaited the girl, a world full of dazzling sparkle and icy beauty, a world that would define her taste and become part of her legacy, the world of her aunt's treasures. While the children still found a measure of support in their stern but loving uncle, their relationship with their aunt, Elizabeth Fyodorovna, or Ella as she was known in the family, was far more complex. The beautiful Ella, Princess of Hesse, granddaughter of Queen Victoria, carried her own deeply buried tragedy in her heart. Legend has it that at 9 years old, after witnessing the horrific death of her younger brother Friedrich, who suffered from hemophilia, she took a vow of celibacy and childlessness. The horror of the thought that she, as a gene carrier, might transmit this terrible disease to her sons shaped her entire future life. When marrying Sergei Alexandrovich, it is believed she warned him of her vow. Their marriage, according to contemporary accounts, was a white marriage. Maria Pavlovna recalled that the couple slept in the same bedroom, but their union was more akin to that of a brother and a sister, two kindred spirits, but not husband and wife. Thus, the presence of her husband's children in her home, living reminders of his past, happy family life, proved a severe test for Elizabeth Fyodorovna. Maria Pavlovna recounted that her aunt received them with an almost hostile coolness, seemingly jealous of her husband's affection for his children. For many years, the children experienced neither affection nor warmth from her. Yet, time and the innocent candor of childhood have a way of melting even the most stubborn ice. Gradually, Elizabeth Fyodorovna grew accustomed to their presence, and a genuine affection began to blossom in her heart. A pivotal turning point arrived with Maria's severe illness. When the young Grand Duchess contracted diphtheria, the very disease that had, in its time, claimed her own mother and sister, Ella exhibited extraordinary selflessness. Forgetting her own dread of the deadly infection, she hired the finest physicians and remained constantly by the girl's bedside, demonstrating truly maternal devotion. It was then that Maria finally understood. Behind her aunt's icy reserve beat a loving yet deeply suffering heart. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. Elizabeth Fyodorovna and Sergei Alexandrovich possessed unimaginable wealth, and the children lived amidst an opulence most could only dream of. From a young age, Maria Pavlovna admired her aunt, her innate grace, impeccable taste, and noble bearing, and of course, her treasures. A dedicated room within the palace served as a vault for the Grand Duchess's jewels, a veritable museum of fine jewelry. Sometimes, when preparing for a ball, Elizabeth Fyodorovna would send her niece to retrieve a particular piece of jewelry, and for the young Grand Duchess, it was a magical journey into a world of sparkling gems. But the tranquility of this world was deceptive. Dark clouds were gathering over Russia. In the early years of the 20th century, following the humiliating defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, the nation reached a boiling point. Sergei Alexandrovich, as the Governor-General of Moscow, bore the indelible mark of responsibility for the Kodinka tragedy, an event that marred the coronation of Nicholas II. The populace dubbed him the Prince of Kodinka, and public hatred for him reached its zenith. He became a prime target for revolutionaries. Then, in the year 1905, tragedy struck, abruptly ending the life of their uncle guardian. For the 15-year-old Maria, this was yet another devastating blow, but even more shocking was her aunt's reaction. Her husband's death shattered Elizabeth Fyodorovna. She had always been devout, but now faith became her sole refuge. She resolved to withdraw from the world forever. A grand sell-off commenced. She distributed a portion of her legendary treasures to relatives and sold the rest. Maria Pavlovna painfully recalled how their palace became empty and cold, stripped not only of artworks, but even of its furnishings. With the proceeds, Elizabeth Fyodorovna founded the Marfo-Mariinsky convent, becoming its abbess. Yet, before permanently renouncing the world, Elizabeth Fyodorovna had to determine the fate of her young niece. And this decision, ostensibly dictated by care, would become for Maria Pavlovna a new, albeit brilliant, form of imprisonment. Dmitry Pavlovich was taken under the emperor's own guardianship, while for Maria, Elizabeth Fyodorovna found what she believed to be an ideal match: Prince Wilhelm of Sweden, second in line to the throne. For the emperor's cousin, this was an exceptionally advantageous marriage. But the 16-year-old Maria, a young woman with progressive views, dreamed of a love match. She had no desire to travel to a foreign land to marry a stranger. Her father, Paul Alexandrovich, also opposed this union, as Nicholas II had by then occasionally permitted him to visit Russia. He was enraged that his daughter's fate had been decided behind his back. According to Maria's recollections, a heated and difficult conversation ensued between him and Elizabeth Fyodorovna. But the Grand Duchess remained unyielding. She persuaded, almost compelled, her niece to agree. The only concession Maria managed to secure was a postponement of the wedding until her coming of age. And so, in the year 1908, a lavish wedding took place in Tsarskoye Selo. Gifts poured in, and naturally, the Romanovs spared no expense. But the most touching and significant gift came from her father. Paul Alexandrovich, stripped of his fortune and living in exile, managed to secure the means to ensure he wouldn't be shamed, bestowing upon his daughter a truly regal present. He commissioned a magnificent sapphire parure from Cartier, the most fashionable and prestigious jeweler of the era. This was no mere parure, it was a symphony of sapphires and diamonds, comprising a tiara, a necklace, and a corsage ornament, a brooch designed for the bodice of a gown. According to some accounts, Paul Alexandrovich funded the creation of the tiara and necklace, while other family members, wishing to assist him, commissioned the corsage from Cartier in the same style. The stones for the parure were chosen with exceptional care, enormous, exceptionally clear sapphires of that cornflower blue, deep sapphire hue so beloved by the Romanovs, surrounded by a glittering cascade of dazzling diamonds set in platinum. The tiara's design was evidently inspired by Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna's famous cornflower tiara. It featured discernible kokoshnik motifs and elegant diamond volutes, yet Cartier's creation for Maria Pavlovna was more austere, more contemporary, embodying the Belle Époque's characteristic garland style. This gift was not merely an adornment, it was a silent message of love and support from her disgraced father. But Maria Pavlovna could not wear it for her own wedding. A different, far heavier and more antiquated ensemble awaited her, prescribed by centuries of Romanov tradition. As the emperor's granddaughter, Maria Pavlovna was required to be wed in a traditional Russian court gown of extremely heavy silver brocade and a prescribed set of bridal jewels. This ritual was obligatory for Grand Duchesses. She had to don an enormous diamond tiara featuring a unique pink diamond at its center, a massive corsage ornament, a weighty necklace, and the famed cherry earrings, each composed of a large diamond and a teardrop pearl. The ensemble was so heavy and uncomfortable that, according to Maria's own recollections, during the wedding banquet she couldn't bear it any longer, removed her earrings and, to the great amusement of Emperor Nicholas II, who sat beside her, hung them on the rim of her wineglass. This small act of rebellion perfectly captured her independent spirit. But her father's gift was not forgotten. Upon moving to Sweden, Maria Pavlovna evidently wore the sapphire parure quite frequently. The Swedish court was incomparably more modest than the Russian, and the treasures she brought from home proved perfectly fitting. Photographs still exist of the young Duchess of Södermanland posing in the austere black Swedish court gown. This attire, introduced in the 18th century by King Gustav III, remained unchanged until the early 20th century. And against the dark velvet, trimmed with ermine, Cartier's sapphires glowed with a dazzling, almost otherworldly beauty. In these photographs, we can discern the tiara and the magnificent corsage brooch. The necklace, regrettably, is only captured in the Grand Duchess's personal photographs, making it difficult to examine in detail. However, a closer look at her Swedish portraits reveals yet another astonishing piece she wore alongside the sapphire necklace, an elegant diamond choker fashioned as a chain of interconnected rings. This ornament was also brought from Russia and had previously belonged to her aunt, Elizabeth Fyodorovna. A photograph exists of Grand Duchess Ella wearing this very choker, which is believed to have been crafted in the workshops of Carl Fabergé. It is probable that Elizabeth Fyodorovna either gifted it to her niece for the wedding or relinquished it when divesting herself of her treasures. Incidentally, this was not the only gift from her aunt. Maria Pavlovna also came into possession of another magnificent parure belonging to Elizabeth Fyodorovna, an emerald and diamond set. The fate of that particular set proved more fortunate, but more on that later. However, the destiny of the sapphires and the Fabergé diamond choker after the tumultuous events to come remains shrouded in mystery. Yet, amidst the splendor of the Swedish court, the young Grand Duchess endeavored to forge a new life for herself. Alas, domestic bliss proved to be an illusion. Despite the arrival of their son, Leonard, her marriage to Wilhelm never truly blossomed. They remained utter strangers to each other. I began to feel that my fiancé was a complete stranger to me, with whom I had no connection whatsoever, she penned in her memoirs. Soon, I felt an almost palpable aversion towards him. The situation grew intolerable. Ultimately, demonstrating unheard-of audacity for the era, she initiated divorce proceedings. Leaving her son behind in Sweden, for he belonged to the Swedish crown, she returned to Russia. Her return coincided with the 300th anniversary celebration of the Romanov dynasty, followed shortly by the outbreak of the First World War. Maria Pavlovna, like many women of the imperial family, became a Red Cross nurse. She returned to her homeland to a reconciled father, who had also arrived back in Russia. It seemed life was offering her a second chance. But catastrophe loomed. The revolution of 1917 swept away the old world and unleashed unimaginable trials upon Maria Pavlovna. She lost nearly everyone she held dear. Her father was executed in the Peter and Paul fortress. Her stepbrother Vladimir and beloved Aunt Elizabeth Fyodorovna were thrown alive into a mine shaft in Alapayevsk. In her memoirs, she recounts how, during those terrifying days, she tried to salvage the few possessions she still had. One of her tiaras, precisely which one remains unknown, she painstakingly dismantled, placed the stones at the bottom of an inkwell, covered them with paraffin wax, and then poured ink on top. The Bolshevik secret police, who searched her home, ransacked everything, but never thought to look inside the simple inkwell on the table. By a sheer miracle, she managed to escape from Russia. By then, she had already married for the second time, this union born of love, to Prince Sergei Putyatin. Initially, in exile, they stayed with her cousin, Queen Marie of Romania. They then relocated to London, joining her brother Dmitri. And it was there, in London, that a final echo from her past reached her. Jewels she had left behind at the Swedish court after her divorce were sent to her from Sweden. Among these treasures was almost certainly the sapphire parure by Cartier, a gift from her father. And here unfolds the most tragic chapter in the history of this particular jewel. The Grand Duchess, desperately in need of funds and utterly unversed in practical matters, with no experience in financial dealings, sold her treasures. She sold them for a pittance, for a mere fraction of their true worth, simply to survive. The trail of the magnificent sapphire parure, a silent witness to her brief Swedish sojourn and a final gift from her executed father, vanishes forever. What then became of her other treasures? The fate of her emerald parure, however, is known. Maria Pavlovna sold it to that very same Queen Marie of Romania, who, during the revolution, had lost her own jewels, imprudently sent to Russia for safekeeping. Later, a tiara from this set found its way into the collection of the esteemed jewelry house Van Cleef & Arpels, though by then fitted with synthetic emeralds. But the Cartier sapphires and a diamond choker by Fabergé vanished without a trace. Maria Pavlovna herself, however, demonstrated astonishing resilience. She opened an embroidery atelier in Paris named Kitmir, which soon began collaborating with the House of Chanel. She divorced her second husband, endured the ruin of her business during the Great Depression, moved to America, wrote her memoirs, and worked as a journalist. In her later years, she lived under the care of her son, Leonard, who, having entered into a morganatic marriage, had forfeited his rights to the throne and resided in Europe. The saga of Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna's sapphire parure is a requiem for a bygone era. Crafted as a symbol of love, it became a silent witness to the collapse of an empire and profound personal tragedy, ultimately offered as a sacrifice on the altar of survival. Today, we can only gaze upon faded vintage photographs and imagine how these cornflower blue sapphires once blazed against black velvet, and wonder whose jewelry box now cradles them. Or perhaps they were dismantled, their stones set into new, unremarkable pieces, forever stripped of their regal history. Every jewel holds the memory of its owners. But what if a piece of jewelry simply vanishes? Does its story end there? Or does it continue to live on, invisibly bearing the imprint of the destinies of those who once possessed it? Thank you for watching this video all the way through. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Let us know in the comments which lost Romanov treasure's fate intrigues you most.